I'm very honored that the Marriotts would let me say a few words. I feel really it's almost unfair when so many would have so much to say that I get to speak. But I think it's very setting. We see the light in the distance. It's a little bit overcast. It's kind of a mixture of what we feel, right? The sadness of such a bright star leaving us, even though it's been 10 years, and yet the light that tells us there's certainly more, and there will be other times. I've never met Georgia personally, but I feel like I know her. I see her face in the faces of her sisters, and in their eyes. And I imagine that it will not be unusual one day for those of you who don't know her, like me. One day someone will tap us on the shoulder and say, Brother Anderson, I'm Georgia Marriott. And I'll say, I knew you before you spoke. One thing in times like these, when we're contemplative and we think about things that matter most to us in life, truth seems to penetrate into our hearts easier. We're less likely to think about the things that don't matter, and we think about things that matter. I just thought, I don't have a big talk. I don't want you to worry about that. But I brought a couple of words you know these words, at least part of them, from William Wordsworth. He was not a member of the church, but truth sounds right to you when you feel in these kind of moments. Of course, we quote often in the church his words that came from Ode on Imitations of Immortality, verse 5. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. We can understand, William Wordsworth can understand that a beautiful young girl like this girl right here in her beautiful dress, her beautiful smile, or these children, they are really no different than we are. They are just moving in a stage, in a different time. And no more is birth the beginning than death is the ending. And William Wordsworth wrote this in his 10th verse. Though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of the glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind, in the primal sympathy, which having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death. And can you imagine 10 years later, we're reading her words out of her journal, and we're thinking about the warm feelings that the Marriotts have for this wonderful light who was in their lives and will be yet in their lives. And these truths are evident to everyone. Of course, the greatest of all truth comes from the Savior. And all of us who have tried to know him and think about him know that these words are as true as the words I just read. I love the story of Lazarus because for many reasons. One, it showed the great love of the Savior for women, his sisters, Lazarus' sisters, Martha and Mary. And you can imagine when he stayed behind, when they came to get him because Lazarus was sick, and he finally told his disciples, he is dead. So then they came into that little town of Bethany. Both Martha first came out and then Mary later. And Martha said to him, let me say it just right. She said,